Hi,
Okay.
Joanie.
Hi.
I'm so glad you're joining us to contribute to the Aphasia Recovery Connection's hope to share information about the impact of stroke on someone other than the person who actually had it, and how, as family members and care partners, we can offer suggestions and stories to help others. So it's great to see you.
You too.
And why don't you tell me again where you are? Because I think that sets a perfect tone for showing how far people can come after a stroke.
What you mean where I live?
Well, where
Or-
you are right now and why you're not home.
Okay. At I'm in Hertfordshire, which is where my youngest daughter Sarah lives, and she just had a baby 7 weeks ago, so we're spending some time with her.
Mhm. And Sarah is the person in your life who had had a stroke um, at a younger age than most think. And I know we were going to talk today about your impressions and your witnessing of how Sarah's independence evolved since her stroke and when she seemed ready and when you were ready to really let her go out on her own. So it would be great if you can share that with our listeners.
Exactly. So I hope some people can relate to this because, as we know, aphasia is very different for most people. With Sarah, she had a stroke when she was 18 in the middle of a school lesson, an English lesson at school, and completely out of the blue with no sign previously. So she was an 18-year-old just about to go off to college and study biology because that was her great love. So she was in hospital for and rehab for about 5 months. And then she came home. She could say yes and no, but often got those mixed up, which I know is another thing that's very common with people who've suffered a stroke. And she had aphasia. At first, she couldn't walk or swallow or talk at all. But gradually she recovered during rehab. So she was just left with aphasia, which was devastating. So we were at home when she got home from hospital and rehab, just her and me, because all her friends had gone to university. And I didn't really know what to do. We had speech and language therapy, which really helped, but she couldn't say anything. She was encouraged to say her first word, which was toaster.
Hmm.
Strange word, yeah. But she couldn't speak in full sentences. And as a mother, I thought I would help her by doing all the talking for her, talking to the doctors, talking to the speech therapist. I would wrap her in cotton wool, which really suffocated both of us, to be honest, and didn't do either of us any good. Um, and then she started recovering, speaking in longer sentences and wanting to be more independent. So she had goals that were set by the speech and language therapist. She wanted to speak. She couldn't read or write or understand numbers very well. So she had lots of challenges. And she gradually learnt to speak and wanted to be more independent and to go out on her own shopping, which really terrified me. So a couple of things that we did to help her. She had a card, which I think a lot of people have, saying, I have aphasia.
May
Please
I
give me
just
more
may I
time.
ask, when you
Yes.
talk about independence and what you were fearful of at the time, and I know it's a long time ago, I think we can
Yeah.
share that this is almost 20, just under 20 years ago, right?
Well, for about 15 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, was she physically independent?
Well, she used to bump into things sometimes because her sight was affected, as
Mhm.
happens to many people with stroke as well. She used to bump into things. She used to have erratic behavior, like she would leave the bath taps running, she would turn the cooker on full. So I didn't really trust her. Um, but those things did improve, and I didn't really appreciate that, to be honest. I was still very protective, fiercely protective
Right. So for
of her.
that reason, letting her be independent, I like to emphasize as a speech pathologist that aphasia on itself, and depending, obviously, shouldn't be the only reason why someone can't achieve a certain amount of level of independence, like going shopping. But by you acknowledging that she had some visual challenges as well as some physical ones as a result of, I can understand that letting her be independent, maybe that was driving or taking a bus or taxi, however she was going to be out of your sight, could be nerve-wracking. So clearly there were reasons beyond her aphasia
Yeah.
that were
And
holding.
also other people's opinion of her as well, because before her stroke, she was very independent. Um, and she had a very strong personality as well. But I worried about what other people would think of her, because people often think a young person who's had a stroke or aphasia is drunk or on drugs or mentally incapable or something like that. And I knew that she wasn't, so I didn't want her to be hurt. And I think that's quite common with a lot of caregivers, that they want to protect their loved one. But after a while, I realized that that wasn't really doing her any good. And it's really tough to let go and to put trust in that person and allow them their freedom. So one of her goals was to learn to drive, because she'd never learned to drive before. And she had specialist driving lessons and passed her test the first time. So we made sure that she had something in the car with all the insurance details and emergency contact details and that kind of thing. And she did actually have a car accident, which was somebody else's fault. But things like Find Your iPhone and things like that are really helpful, I think, for family members, because we knew where to go to help her. And it was scary, but she got through it and she coped with it. So it was another rung on the ladder, really, to her independence.
And how did she, if at all, give you pushback when she wanted more independence and you were wrapping her around the cotton? How did she let you know she needed to be free a little bit more?
Um, well, there have been studies to show that gesturing and facial kind of, yeah, that kind of thing was really helpful, because she would say, stop.
Mhm.
If I tried to say, Sarah can't do this,
Mhm.
because obviously some days she was more fatigued than others and things were more difficult. But I used to say, Sarah can't do that. And then, of course, a few weeks down the line, maybe she could do it. So I think you make a lot of assumptions sometimes with
I
aphasia.
think that's important for people to know. And I, again, just want to highlight how much I appreciate the differentiation between just aphasia, because at one point you said all she had left, or she just had aphasia when she was done
Yeah.
with her rehab. But she did have the visual issue, and
Mm.
that are reasons to heighten the holding on to, because
But
those
the
are more.
biggest thing was aphasia, huge. People don't realize how huge it is. It affects every aspect of your life and
Mhm.
every family dynamic, I think.
Mhm. And
You,
how long in her recovery journey and process would you say her aphasia got to a point, and I've not met her, but how has her aphasia changed and evolved so that it's less noticeable, if at all, when she's now fully independent and a mother?
if you met her now for the first time and you didn't know old Sarah, you would maybe not even know. Some of her sentences are a bit quirky, but you wouldn't really know that she had a brain injury. But she knows, and she knows that she's different. And she uses her phone a lot because she still can't read and write very well. So things like that really help her to live independently. And when she had her stroke, they more or less wrote her off as far as working was concerned. But now she works full time producing cancer treatments in a lab. So she's working in the field of biology, which she always wanted to do. And there's a lot of sort of adjustments at work, which of course the law does protect people with any sort of disability. But in reality, people with aphasia rarely return to full-time work. And I think that's quite sad, really. But
Too.
she's very resilient. And
And
she
she's very
got married and had a baby now, which is
amazing
amazing.
and fortunate that the people that employ her recognize that aphasia shouldn't be a reason why someone can't prove their competence and fulfill something they're very capable of doing.
Absolutely.
That's,
Absolutely.
she's
But
lucky.
I think preparation, as far as independence goes, I think preparation is really important. Like I said, the thing that we kept in the car with the information about her insurance, making sure she had a little ID card in case she needed it, which she didn't always want to use it, but it's really, really helpful.
And when, just to wrap this pride up that you must have had, when did you feel most proud or ready that her ability to be successful would let you worry less and that she could be the most independent self?
I still worry about her now, like any mum would worry about her kids. Well, she's not a kid, she's a lady now.
She'll always be your kid, your baby.
Yeah. But I think my proudest moment actually was when she went to Starbucks and she ordered a coffee for herself, and she rang me up because she was so proud, and I was as well. And that was a real step, because there's so many different combinations of coffee you can have at Starbucks, and it was amazing really that she could do that herself.
And we'll just acknowledge that she couldn't be the successful person she was and is now if she didn't have someone like you as a support system and everybody else around her. Because, as I said in the beginning, stroke and really aphasia impact all the relationships a person has. So it's wonderful to be able to prove to people that things can constantly change in the presence of aphasia, certainly for the better when it's an
Absolutely.
acquired injury like Sarah. Thank you for sharing. And I know that you and Sarah share a lot of your story in the UK, and I thank you for contributing so much of it to the world.
Thank you. And thank you to Aphasia Recovery Connection, because it's brilliant.
Thank you.